Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals.
Bonjour, bienvenue everyone. My name is Dr. Krista Kostroman, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode where we are on a mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. The DNA Talks wants to talk about what your DNA is saying. And in doing so, we want to talk about it in a very accessible, easy way. We don't want to get too bogged down here in the minutiae and the detail and the biochemistry and the genetics, all the glory of it. We really want to cut to the chase of what things can we share that you can adopt today and that can meaningfully change your health, meaningfully change your life, and very importantly, meaningfully change your happiness, right? Isn't health and happiness what we're kind of all questing for in one way or another? So welcome, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us to investigate, to learn, and to grow your awareness of both DNA and your health with us. The intention, again, of this is to offer tangible takeaways, but let's be mindful, while I am a doctor, I am not your doctor. And so anything that I'm going to be saying here today, while it is founded in truth, it is a very general truth. And you need to work with your practitioner to understand, is the larger global truth applicable to you, a person, right? Not every piece of healthcare advice should be implemented. There's a lot of health histories, there's a lot of genes, there's a lot of other circumstances that found what you should be bringing into your healthcare plan. So I say that with sincerity. I don't say that with like a, let me lawyer up and protect myself. I mean that as a practitioner who plainly has often seen people come in and be like, I heard this on a podcast and I tried it and now I feel horrible, right? It's that discernment. It's that taking a beat, working with other people, getting advice before you bring something into your health, into your day-to-day routines, because what we want to see and what I would imagine you want to see is your best health picture. And that's best determined between you and your doctor. All right. So enough of that. Let me, before I jump into our topic today, before I jump into something that I'm so excited and grateful and privileged to be talking about, that being mental health, allow me to introduce myself, because I'm not sure that there's really been an opportunity for me yet to speak to you and to introduce myself and who I am and what I do here. So my name is Krista Kostroman. Again, I am a naturopath and I am the Chief Science Officer here at the DNA Company, which in my mind at least is just a fancy way of calling me a nerd. I come to this role through many different streams of awareness, in the sense that I have a background in technology. Once upon a time, believe it or not, I was a coder. Yeah, people I went to school with may challenge that. I wasn't a strong coder, but I was a coder. My background is in computer science. I also come to this with a background in naturopathy. So I'm trained as a naturopath. I'm licensed as a naturopath. That decision to be a naturopath as opposed to the other collection of healthcare providers was largely based on a passion I have for preventative medicine. And it's not to say that that doesn't exist in other segments of medicine, more to say that as a naturopath, looking at the perspective as well as looking at the modalities that space affords me, that's how I chose to pursue clinical medicine. Okay. And then lastly, I come with the perspective of genetics and genomics. It's something that I have been playing with and practicing with for many years now, and have had the incredible fortune of being trained and supported by both Dr. Mohammed Mansour and Dr. Winnie Sue, who are people very foundational and pivotal to our company. And so I say this with reverence and gratitude that I'm able to speak to and offer pearls, not just based on my own energies and efforts, but those that have offered me training and support. And so I just offer a moment of gratitude for them. So I come to this role as chief science officer with a passion for preventative medicine, with a passion for genomics, but with a really unique background in that I started off in computer science. I started off in artificial intelligence about 20 years ago, before it was something that too many people were scared about. My goal when I was in my undergrad, it was a very lofty and ambitious goal, is I wanted to understand the human mind. So fascinated by this incredible body, by this incredible thought creating brain that we have. And that was my goal. That's why and how I approached coding and computer science. And that motivated me. And, as I've made a few career pivots, right, as I merge these three areas that often don't get merged together, right? How many times have you heard of a naturopath that likes her computers? That has always informed how I approach things, right? So I'll give the example is, when you're coding something, if you accidentally put a semicolon or a comma in the right place, it completely changes the program. Just like with your DNA, one snip can change the entire story, right? And let's be plain, it's rare that it's just one snip. It's rare that it's just one semicolon, but it happens. And so that taught me the power of doing smaller things and the incredible, incredible impact that can have, right? And I bring that into my medicine. I always think of computer scientists loves to optimize. I love to optimize. And I think a different way of saying optimize is be lazy, in the sense of I want to do the least amount of work to get the biggest reward. Let's be plain about our language here. Optimize, lazy, kind of the same thing. And that's okay. That's very okay. Looking for the best value is very good. We want to offer energy and efforts not just to our health. We want to offer them to play and to joy and to all the other lovely things that we engage with in this world. Okay. So I think of the smaller things and how they can have big impact, as well as, and I think this is really important for how we approach health, how we approach learning and figuring out what the small things are that are going to have the big impact, is thinking about different systems, different things that touch upon our health, right? So today's topic is going to be mental health, right? And it would be lovely to approach it just from a psychotherapy lens. But let's be honest, we've had more than 40, 50 years of talk therapy. Well, more if we're going to jump back to Freud's day, but there's been a long history of talk therapy, and it alone does not work. Just like there's been a long history of pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical interventions. And are they needed? Are they important? Absolutely. But has it solved it? No. We have to consider that when it comes to health, we are not going to find just one system, just one awareness that is going to solve and fix it all, right? We have to consider different systems. We have to consider different lines of code. And through this glorious, lovely, tangled, I won't call it a mess, I'll call it a beautiful tapestry, a beautiful weaving of life. That's where we can figure out and find and claim our health. So I hope that's an intro into not only my career, my perspective, how I come to my medicine, how I hope to come and offer genetic information, but also hopefully offering you a little bit of inspiration and a shift in the way you might want to think about your health and the way you might want to think about how you approach tending yourself. Okay? So let's jump into mental health. I believe it's October, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I love that this is happening. I love that there has been this shift in society. I remember when I was young, I had a conversation with my mom, and I forget how we got into this conversation, but we started talking about stress, and I made something that I thought was a very obvious statement. I said, well, of course stress can make you sick. And she looked at me and she gave me like, God bless my mother. I'm God bless my mother. Mom, if you're watching, thank you for raising me. I'm so sorry you had to raise me. I'm sure I was a lot. But my mom looked at me and she's like, Krista, that hasn't always been the case, right? Back in my day, if you had said stress impacted your health, you would have been laughed out of the doctor's office. I think I'm very fortunate in that I grew up in a space where we were aware mind, stress, etc., influenced health, but there's still a large percentage of our population where that's new information and where that does not feel like comfortable information because they weren't raised on it, right? The idea that how you feel, how your brain works impacts your health is still relatively new, okay? As I think it is how we talk about how do we support mental health, and we need to support it. I'm going to borrow statistics from the US, but if we're looking in the US, at any given moment, 1 in 5 people are struggling with something to do with their mental health, okay? Be it pervasive sadness, be it anxiety, be it stress, overwhelm, or something more severe. When we talk to the more severe, we're looking at numbers at 1 in 20 have a more significant mental health issue, right? And let's humanize that. There's many different things. I think it's easy to dismiss it as, oh, it's just the crazy person over there. But when was the last time that, there is such a spinning in your mind that you had to remove yourself or you didn't make a great decision, right? All of that is mental health. And so it's really important that we sit with it and we support one another as well as ourselves through it. Okay. And so here's how I'd like us to talk about mental health today. Okay. I want us to talk about it in terms of community. Okay. And I have 5 different types of community that we're going to talk about. And the definitions of community are going to go beyond who is in your neighborhood and do you guys see each other at the local rec center. All right. First of all, I'm going to talk about the community that exists within you, your microbiome of the skin, all of your GI tract, all those little friendly bugs and critters and viruses and all the glorious parts that go into that community. Let's talk about that. Next, I want to talk about the community of body, right? When we talk about the brain, when we talk about the gut, when we talk about sex organs, all of these arguably are communities and systems unto themselves, and they coexist within your body. So let's talk about the community of your body, okay? We're also going to talk about the community of your mind, what's happened to you, how you think, that affects things, right? We're going to talk about the traditional definition of community, those that are around you, be it your family, your chosen family, your friends. And lastly, we're going to talk about the community of spirit, right? And that one, I think, is important to me. And I think when I personally do my intakes, when I work with patients, it is the thing I save to last. And people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about religion, or I don't want to talk about woo-woo spirit stuff. And I'm going to offer a few contextualizing pieces of information at the end as to why talking about community of spirit is very important. Okay. So let's start talking about community of gut. I think it's really fun to kind of drop the information on people that they're actually more bacteria and virus than they are cells of their own selves, right? We have a community of bacteria, fungus, parasites, viruses within our gut. And I appreciate that sounds gross. I appreciate that sounds like, a child's party who's just discovered worms and dirt and kind of all the gross things. But it is a wonderful, wonderful backdrop that supports us. When our gut is well supported, not only is it creating nutrition for us, as in we feed it and it creates, it augments, it betters the nutrition that we have to support our body, it is also one of the biggest players in the creation of things like serotonin, GABA, and all the other things that we talk about. All of those chemicals, all of those messengers that we talk about in the brain, that happens in the gut, right? There is now technology that can go into the gut, takes a sample of that biome, and it can, with reasonable reliability, predict. Are you struggling with mental health? That's how incredibly informative it is, right? Ask yourself this. When was the last time, let's just say you eat a pretty good diet, right? And then you go and you eat something that isn't all that great for you, right? I bet you can tell the next day you're a little bit off. I'm not saying you're diving into depression, not saying you're diving into anxiety, but you can tell yourself is off. That's not a nutritional thing necessarily, because your diet overall as well, that's a shift in how your gut bacteria is communicating with your immune system and communicating with your brain. Okay. So when we talk about mental health, as much as we want to talk about talk therapy, as much as we want to talk about these sorts of things, we have to talk about what is going on in the gut. How is that supporting us? How is that nourishing us? How is that managing inflammation? Right? I think inflammation is tossed around a lot. I think that's something I'll do maybe a podcast on a different day, because I feel like that word is just sprinkled over food like salt, to kind of be like, sure, I know what I'm talking about. We're talking about inflammation. But your gut is one of the bigger curators of inflammation and wellness. So community of gut, I think, is really important. The biome there understands what's going on there and what you can do to support your biome. A quick tip to take away, right? If you're looking to support and improve your biome, short of getting a plan from your doctor, here's a goal for you. Every week, I want you to go to the grocery store and pick out 5 new plants that you've never eaten before, never tasted, never worked with before, right? Every week, I want you to be seeking out new plants. Start eating those new plants. I promise it is going to shift your gut for the better, okay? Our gut has evolved largely in spaces of diversity, and it craves that difference. It craves those plants. It craves those nuances. As you start diversifying what you're eating, plant diversity, not processed food diversity, you're going to shift your microbiome. And I promise that is going to shift your mental health. Okay. There's your first takeaway for the day. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is going to be community of body. Okay. And I made reference before that we have all these different organ systems that are going to work together, right? So I'm sure you've been to, anyone who's well-versed in the functional medicine space. Every practitioner in that space is going to say, I have the reason why things aren't working, right? And I would offer there's a grain of truth to it all, right? We can talk about your sex organs and all of the sex steroid hormones. Does testosterone, does estrogen, those associated levels, play a role in mental health and you feeling well? Absolutely, right? If you need evidence of that, talk to any XX, any female who menstruates, and ask her the variety of moods that she has over the course of her cycle. And it varies. It varies based on what sex steroid hormones are being produced. Okay. And so if you're going through a period where your hormones are not imbalanced, that is going to impact your mental health, right? So we can also think to GI, right? Aside from the microbiome, GI is where we're absorbing, digesting, and then metabolizing our food. How are we integrating that in, right? There is incredible breadth, incredible amount of information that says nutritional deficiencies beget poor mental health. There have been several times where people have come into my clinic saying, I don't feel well. I'll run lab work on them. They will be deficient in the basics, vitamin D, magnesium, few other B vitamins, right? And supplementing simply with those alongside other things. I don't want to dismiss it, but that foundation before they're even able really to feel well enough to change other things, that will shift their picture, right? GI, how you're absorbing nutrition, is really important. Okay. As is the brain, as is inflammation, as is everything that is going on in there. I think there's a lot of people that can speak to, the neurotransmitter theories of the world, and those are important, right? We know when there's imbalance in the brain, you're not necessarily going to have access to good mental health. But I think the conversation when we talk about the brain can become a bit reductionistic, and we don't want to just position this as brain health. And when I think of body systems, I think of genomic testing being one of the biggest strengths and leg ups that we can have, if you will, right? In the sense that your genes are not the be all and end all, but they really curate how these different organ systems work, what organ systems you might be strong in, what organ systems you might be weak in, and how they work together. And so I think if you come forward with, I'm depressed and, I eat pretty well, I think my biome's in check, and I want to know, can this be coming from hormones? Can this be coming from, I don't detox properly, I don't clean my body properly. I don't, can this be coming from an organ system within my body that isn't functioning properly? Genomics is one of the better places, I think, alongside lab work to be starting, because it, again, is the code, right? It is the code of our body. It is what has birthed our body. So that is kind of the community of body that I think is really important. Because again, if one of those systems are off, the body to an extent is off, and sometimes mental health, depression, anxiety is that communicator, is that signal of not feeling great. Something needs attention. Okay. The next thing of mental health that we're going to be talking about is that of mind. There's a lot of studies, and we give credit and credence to like the Gabor Mates of the world, who have really beautifully articulated that not only is it just your thought processes that influence your mind, but it's also your experiences in the world, right? We know that if there is some form of trauma being a small thing, trauma being a big thing, different things that will impact how you experience, view the world, and how you think through the world. Okay. We know that's really important. And I think that's a lot of where therapy and a lot of where becoming aware of thought processes, as well as meditation, can come in and support mental health, right? We talk about here, the hope and that you can change. And I think sometimes when you're stuck in a place of anxiety, depression, or other mental health, there's a script almost running within the head. This is helpless. This is, I can't shift, I can't move, I can't do differently. And my heart hurts for that, because I can appreciate the feeling of futility and the feeling of helplessness that comes with that, right? And that's part of the mind, that's part of the scripting that can take hold. And I think that's why it's really important to engage not only in psychotherapy, but a genomically informed psychotherapy to support, right? And why do I say this? When we talk about adverse childhood events, right? Not every brain, not every genome is created equal. There are certain genotypes, certain profiles, right, that are more susceptible to the impact of adverse childhood trauma, right? And again, so I say this with the light of, when you know those sorts of propensities, it enables a few things when it comes to mental health. First of all, it takes away some blame. The fact that you can't get over some of your mental health is no longer on you. It's part of just your makeup. It's part of how your brain processes the world. Knowing that takes away some of the shame, and then also gives your therapist, gives yourself different spaces to work within, right? If you know that you don't process stress hormone well, and you know that that means these memories are going to be more ingrained, right? There's going to be more energy and effort into, okay, how do we unlearn? How do we reprogram? How do we reprocess? Compared to, we jump back to body systems. Maybe it's not necessarily how your brain has been programmed. It's a malnutrition. Maybe it's a sex steroid deficiency, right? Having insight into genes, working with people who care and are willing to take the time to figure out what isn't working, there is the power. Because what I'm trying to offer, again, and I'll keep saying this as we go along, mental health is this beautiful, beautiful, complex being that is not just about think your way out of it, or it doesn't exist, or it doesn't count, right? It's this conversation of what bigger systems are at play, how are they influencing you, And then what are the small things you can do to shift and change that, right? Your vitamin D is low. I promise if you get that back up, it's not going to fix everything, but it's going to give you the energy to do something else, right? Don't boil the ocean. Find the small things, let them give you energy, and then find another small thing, right? So when it comes to mind, I would offer that's probably going to be, working with a therapist around thoughts, as well as understanding the trauma and how deeply embedded that is in the brain, alongside how are you able to unlearn and relearn how your brain experiences the world. Okay. The next thing, the glorious next wonderful thing is I want to talk about community. Community is vital and pivotal for mental health, right? Oftentimes, especially when we speak to more the anxiety, depression spectrum, right? A lot of those illnesses, that struggle, that we all carry, part of that is because we get lost in our head. And this, I'm not saying this to shame you and be like, shame on you for getting stuck in your head, but one of the better ways to gently step out of that is engagement with community. Across the board, it is studied that people with anxiety, depression, as they open up and engage with community in safe, meaningful ways, their health improves. When we look at communities that are engaged with one another, that help one another, that are aware of one another, that see one another, that helps with mental health. The incidences of mental health go down, right? Because your wellness is not exclusively on yourself. And while I say, yes, of course, your wellness is always your responsibility, there are other people that are checking in and supporting, right? When you're trying to do big things, when you're trying to be well and happy, it's a big, beautiful thing. You don't do it alone, right? That's part of something that you do within community. Look at children playing, right? Can a child play alone and enjoy themselves? Absolutely. But you toss more children in there, that's where the laughter comes. That's where the creativity comes. That's where big things are built. Humans are community-based animals. And so, again, there's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? As you develop certain mental health conditions, there's a bit of withdrawal. But similarly, that with that bringing back in, that coming into community, into family, that's going to support. Okay, so that would be one thing that I would offer. And I think, apart from having other people check in on you and having other people care, and that sense of being seen and heard, which is irreplaceable when it comes to mental health. I'll offer a little bit of an anecdote, and then I'm going to jump on to the next points. But there's a very elegant study. I believe it was done at Stanford, maybe 25 years ago. And it looked at, it's notorious that students just before exams, they'll start to get sick because they're kind of powering through all this stuff. They're neglecting their health. They're not eating properly. It's really common that they'll get sick before exams. And they did this study that just before exams, when they knew they're going to see a lot more people coming in for colds, they had doctors at the student health center treat students in one of two ways. When a student came in with a cold, one way would be like, okay, you have a cold. Here's, whatever prescription, here's whatever medication, here's whatever, go off, go have fun. The other stream, right, looked at, the same person come in, they gave the same prescription or whatever it was, but they would also say the statement of, wow, you're going through exams. It must be really rough to have a cold, right? It was just a sentence, and it was acknowledging the humanity. It was humanity. It was acknowledging creating a social bond there. The students in that group, the students that had that community, that exchange, that socialization with a doctor that was more human than here's a prescription, go away, they had a reduction in the rate of cold by 60%. In the sense that the cold left quicker, was less severe compared to the other students, right? Community is important. A sentence as simple as, wow, that must be tough, changed the health outcomes of those groups. That's in part why therapy works. That's in part why community works, right? Again, as much as we like to think of ourselves as this isolated creature, we're more biome than we are human. We're more system engagements than we are one body. We are more than just our body. We are community, right? So when we talk about mental health, we need to talk about us within the larger picture, right? And this includes factors that are really difficult. Let's be honest, this includes socioeconomics. If you're sitting on that lower end of the spectrum, that impacts your health. And I offer that in acknowledgement, not necessarily solution. If I could fix it, I promise I would. But I think factors like that need to be considered. You can't necessarily control money you have coming in, but you can be aware of that's a point of health, and that needs to be your doctor needs to be aware of it and supporting of it. I think the next thing that we're going to talk about is community of spirit. And this is not a conversation of religion, and this is not a conversation of spirituality, and this is not a conversation of woo-woo. There have been many, many studies that have looked at various religious communities around the world, right? I'm talking Judaism, Christianity, Islam, paganism, several different types of, insert religious practice. Across all of these practices, as well as Buddhism, right? We don't have to kind of have a monotheistic or even a theistic version, right? Across many different religious platforms, those who had a religious tradition and actively participated in it, right? We're not talking about the C&E Christians that show up just Christmas and Easter. We're talking about those who practice, right, on a weekly, daily basis. They had better health outcomes. Okay. Why is that? I would offer it's for a few reasons. Reason number one, community, right? If you're showing up to the same place of worship, the same place, you're seeing people, they're checking in on you, they care, you care for them, right? It's a two-way street. You're taken out of just your body, just your mind, and engaged with community in a larger, more meaningful way, okay? The next thing I would offer that is the fact that within any religious practice, there's time taken out every day to rest the mind, to rest the body, and to be reflective, right? Buddhists often have some practice. Buddhist Hindus have like meditation practices. Christians, Muslim, Jews, they'll have a prayer practice. Pagans, it might be a little bit more autosensorily involved in that there's music or scents or plants. But there is a practice that stops their day and gives them awareness of how they fit into a larger picture, right? And the last element here is that within all of these faith streams, there's an awareness that you're part of a community and you're to be contributing to a community, okay? There is some very elegant, beautiful research that looks at altruism and how altruism shifts health, as in how frequently you get sick, but also, and more importantly to today's conversation, mental health. It is shown that if a group of people, they were struggling with depression, and the intervention here was nothing, or the intervention was do something of self-care, right? Take a bath or meditate, or here's this self-care act, do that. Or the other alternative was, we want you to volunteer in this way. And so the time commitments were the same across the measures. Do you know where the best benefit for mental health was? Those who had an altruistic or community-based service, right? That bettered mental health more than acts of self-care, right? And I don't say that to belittle efforts towards self-care. Self-care is incredibly important and needs to be considered, right? You have to pour from a full cup. Your nutrition, your mental health, like these things need to be on point before per se you can offer to others. But do not think that offering to others is something that just drains your cup. It reinforces community, right? It reinforces that you're not just stuck in your head alone, right? It changes, right? When you're happy, your brain is sending different messages to your gut, and that will change the way your biome exists there, which then in turn changes the nutrition you have access to, right? It changes the neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the melatonin, all the glory that is created. So when we talk about community of spirit, right, it is taking a step back to have practices that connect you to the larger world, as well as actions that connect you to the larger world, right? And I know this may not be the typical mental health talk, right? I know we're supposed to be talking about genes. We're supposed to be talking about fancy, sexy science. Patients will come to me often, right, for genomic reports, genomic reportings, or in my private practices, right? This fancy medicine that I do. And I don't want to deny it. What I do is so cool. And for the nerds out there, super, super sexy. Like, it's spectacular. It's so powerful. But it still does come down to foundations, right? I was at a medical conference this past week, and I was the lone naturopath. I think there was maybe one other naturopath, and it was probably about 200 MDs. And I found it very fascinating that with all of the pharmacotherapy out there, with all of the modern day surgery, this conference was really taking a step back and saying, when we're talking about longevity and proactive medicine, it all came back to these foundations, right? How are you engaging your microbiome, right? Which really is a reflection of diet, as well as, your environment. Okay. How are you resting yourself? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? How are you engaging with your neighbors? Right? The science we do here, the genomics we do here, so powerful. But remember this, as fancy as our science is, it will by and large boil down to these beautifully easy things, right? When we talk about our bad genes being turned on, that's largely a byproduct of stress and inopportune access to health. How do we access health, right? Eat properly, sleep properly, love properly, love yourself, love your community, love what you're doing, right? Yeah. I know some people want a more fancy term of like, take this pill and do that. And I think we'll get into that. I have a lot of opinions on supplements and pills and diet, and I have a lot of opinions. But the core of those opinions, the core of the take home, is always going to come down and boil down to something that isn't per se sexy, but it is what it is, right? Do these key foundational things, your health is going to blossom in incredible ways. And then we can do the fun kind of like biohacking, trendy, fun things. So I look forward to engaging with you in future podcasts. I think we have a lot of different things in store for you this season, many different exciting interviews, a whole wonderful host, new cast of clinicians that I'm really excited for everyone to meet. I want to thank you all for being here, for listening to me kind of talk into the box that is before me. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave comments down below, doing all those fun things that I think the internet and technology and keeps us all the more connected. When we talk about community, I think it's really easy to dismiss social media and talk about how bad it is. And I have opinions, but I mean, it also enables us to connect. It enables us to have a community. It enables me to talk to the world and for the world to talk to me. And so I hope you do that. Please follow us on Instagram. You can access this and all our other podcast episodes on Spotify or Apple. The team is going to provide you with all those links. And I'm really thank you for this time. If you have any thoughts or questions, do not hesitate to reach out. And part of that, I'd love to hear, what more would you like us to be talking on, right? Offer us subjects, offer us health problems, offer us a gene, direct us. We see this podcast as a service. We see this as something that we can offer you to help you in our health, to understand everything and the beautiful blossoming that healthcare is going through. So don't make yourself a stranger. We're on Instagram at DNA Talks podcast. You can tell I'm great at this stuff. And then I'm also on Instagram, and my Instagram is drkostroman.nd.official. So once again, thank you kindly, everyone, for your time, for your ears, for your thoughts. And I hope I hope that the pillars of mental health that I went through, there was something that you could grab onto. And again, remember, it just takes one thing. Hear this podcast, think of one takeaway, see if you can change it. I promise the ROI on that, the benefit of that small character change in the code, right? It's going to have a lot of benefit. Don't hesitate to keep in touch with us. We want to be part of your health journey. It's what we're passionate about. Thank you. Au revoir.